Imagine building a web page without control over spacing. Elements would be cluttered and design would be chaotic. That's where CSS margins come in, providing the much needed space and structure. Welcome everyone. In today's video, we are going to discuss about CSS margins and how it helps us to create space around elements and make the look of the web page more professional. So without wasting any time further, let's proceed with the video. Remember, proper spacing can make or break a page. So let's explore the fundamentals of CSS margin. Margins are used to create space around elements. Margins are the space outside of any defined borders. So the space outside of your borders are nothing but the margin. Now we will discuss the following concepts of CSS margins like individual, shorthand, auto, inherited, and collapse margins. All margins properties can have the following type of values. It can be auto, it can be length, it can be percentage, or it can be inherit. Now I want to share a small tip with you. Always use margins in your web page designs to control the spacing around elements and avoid cluttered design. Have you ever faced issues with cluttered design in your web page? Share your experience in the comment and also share what solution you have used in those situations. Individual margins. Now individual margins helps us to set specific margin for each side of an element. For example, a specific amount of space on the left side and a different amount of space on the right. The border style property is used, and with the help of this property we can specify the individual margins for our elements. The following values can be used for it. Individual margins allow you to set specific margin for each side of an element. So you are going to use it when you want to specify a specific margin to a specific side of the element. The following properties can be used: margin top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left. So let's quickly see how we are going to use individual margins in our web page. So here we are on our Visual Studio. So I'm going to create few HTML and CSS inside CSS margins folder. Okay, so you can see here I have included an HTML page with the name individual.html, and inside that HTML page I am having an individual margin heading, and inside the body I am having one h1 and a paragraph. So if I will quickly run this and show you the output, all that I need to do is to go live, is to click on the go live at the bottom, and here you see the output. So let me open this web page and that VS Code side by side so that I can show you the changes and the code simultaneously. Here you go. Now you can see the amount of space that I am having between this heading and a paragraph. If you want to increase this space, all that you need to do is to provide a margin bottom to this H1 or a margin top to this para. Here I am writing down margin bottom and 60 pixels, and you can see the space has been increased. Similarly, if I want to increase some left margin for the paragraph, I will use paragraph. Here I can mention margin left and let's mention 20 pixels. So you can use individual margins specifically when you want to provide margin only to a specific side of that specific element. Now a small tip I want to give to you: you should always use individual margin when you want to precisely control element spacing of each side of element. Have you ever faced any such challenges which is solved with individual margin only? Do share your experience in the comment. Every margin that we discuss adds an extra layer of control over the design. Now the spotlight is on shorthand margin. Now shorthand margins allow setting all 4 margins in one single declaration. Now this way of providing margin is used a lot of time because it is a shorthand practice, and by just declaring one single line you can provide different margins on all 4 sides, and you can provide same margin as well. So there are some examples. If we provide a single value, suppose we are providing margin and then 10 pixels, so that 10 pixel margin will be applied on all the 4 sides: top, right, bottom, and left. If we provide 2 values, for example 10 pixels and 20 pixels, then 10 pixels will be applied on top and bottom, 20 pixels will be applied on left and right. If 3 values are specified, so 10 pixels or the first value will be applied to the top, second value will be applied to the left and right, and third value will be applied to the bottom. And if we specify 4 values, it's obvious that the first will be top, second will be right, third will be bottom, and fourth will be left. It will be always in the order of top, right, bottom, and left. So let's quickly see how we are going to use shorthand margins. So here we are on our VS Code, and let's quickly create an HTML page for shorthand margins. So you can clearly see I have created a shorthand.html where I am having a title with shorthand margin, a heading and a paragraph. So let's see the output of it. For that, what we can do, we can remove everything from this URL except for the IP address and the port name. Click on CSS crash course, click on CSS margins, click on shorthand.html. So here you can see the output of it. Now I'm going to use a shorthand margin over here on that H1. So here I'm just using margin and then 30 pixels. So as soon as I will save it, it will add this 30 pixel margin on the top, right, bottom and left. So let me quickly save it. And here you go. You can see the same margin is applied on all the sides. Now instead of providing one value, what will happen if I will provide two values? So before I show you that, let me inspect this. So let me right click on this page and click on inspect. Let me click on this arrow and hover over this H1. Now if you see the margin over here, the margin is clearly saying it is 30 pixels. Now let me make some changes over here. Let me provide two values as 30 pixels and let's suppose 50 pixels and save it. Let me hover again, and now you can clearly see the margin is 30 pixels and 50 pixels, where the top and bottom is 30 pixels and left and right are 50 pixels. Now if I provide three values, for example, if I provide 50, 80 and 20 pixels. So if I see it now, you can clearly see the top is 50 pixels, the left and right are 80 pixels and the bottom is 20 pixels. And of course, if I'm going to provide all the four values and save it now, so you can clearly see the top is 50, the right is 80, the bottom is 20 and the left is 10 pixels. So this is the shorthand margin where we just provide the property as margin and we can provide 1, 2, 3 or 4 values, and with the help of one single declaration you can provide margins on any or all the sides. Now small tip for you over here is always use shorthand margin to quickly and efficiently provide margins in your web page. Do you prefer using shorthand margin over individual margins? Share your thought in the comment. Building a well-spaced web page is like constructing a well-organized room. Let's look how auto margins can help. The auto value in CSS margins allows the browser to automatically calculate and adjust the margin. It is commonly used for centering elements horizontally with their parent containers. Setting margin left auto and margin right auto is the way we can actually center the element. When margin left and margin right both are set to auto, browser divides the available space equally on both sides. So let's quickly do that. So here we are on our VS Code and let's quickly create an HTML page for auto margin. So here we are on our VS Code and you can see that I have created a page for auto margin with the name auto.html. I have added required title and heading and paragraph over there, and now I'm going to quickly add auto for H1. So let me add margin left as auto and similarly margin right as auto as well. Now if I will save it, I am thinking of that the H1 heading will be at the center of the page, but if I will save it, it won't. You have to specify width property as well. So if I'm specifying width over here, let's suppose 300 pixels, and then I'm saving it, so you can see it is bringing it to the center. But the point over here is, let me inspect the page. Let me click on this arrow and select the heading. The point over here is now the width of the H1 is set to 300 pixels. So it will set the width of the heading to 300 pixels and then set the margin on the left and right accordingly. If you will not set the width, automatically this will take the whole width of the page. Now I know the text margin is coming in the new line. To solve this, what you can do is you can increase the width of the heading. Let's suppose 350 pixels. Let's save this and here you go. That's how you can use auto value to the margin left and margin right property. Even you can just simply use a shorthand margin over here and this will work. You don't need to go with margin left and margin right, because even if you will use a shorthand, it is going to give it to the left and right side. It's also going to give it to the top and bottom, but here left and right is more important because it aligns to center horizontally and not vertically. So top and bottom doesn't matter at all. Have you used auto margin in your project? Please share your experience in the comment for what purpose you have used it and how it resolved your issues. Each margin property adds a layer of refinement in your design. So let's refine more by using collapsed and inherited margin. Now in CSS, child elements can inherit some properties from the parents. Unfortunately, margin is one of the property which is not automatically inherited. So what if you want to inherit the margin property from the parent? The answer is very simple. You can use inherit keyword as the value of the margin. the child element will have the same margin as its parent because of the inherit keyword. So this is what inherited margin. So what about collapse margin? Margin collapsing occurs when two vertical margins meet, and instead of adding up the margins of both, it gives the margin of the largest value. For example, if two elements are there, one with margin bottom as 20 pixels and the adjacent one with margin top as 10 pixels. So definitely the total amount of margin between them should be 30 pixels, right? But that won't be the result. It will collapse the margin and will take 20 pixels as the margin between them rather than using 30 pixels. So that's what margin collapsing is. So let's quickly see how we can use inherited margin, how margin collapsing happens, and also how to overcome the margin collapsing situation. So guys, you can see I have already created an HTML page inherited margin over here, where I am having an h1 paragraph, a div is having 3 paragraphs inside it. So let's quickly see the output of it. Here I am refreshing and clicking on inherited.html. So here you can see the heading, this is para 1, and first, second and third para of the div is right over there. Now let me add some margin for the div. So for the div I am providing margin as 30 pixels and save it. So you can see I have created a page over here with the name inherited.html with required title, heading, paragraph, a div with 3 paragraphs inside it, and here is the output on the right side. Now if I'm going to provide a margin over here for the div, so let me provide a margin for the div. So if I'm going to provide a margin for the div, let's suppose margin as 50 pixels and save it. So you can see there is a margin of 50 pixels for the div, but let me inspect the page, click on this arrow and hover over the div. So you can see the div is having 50 pixels of margin on all the sides, but if I see the paragraph inside the div, they are still having 16 pixels of margin. You can see that. But if I'm adding a paragraph over here, and to the margin section I will add inherit and save it. So now you can see, though to the paragraph I have set margin as inherit, the first paragraph is still having 8 pixels of margin over here. But if I see the margin over here in these paragraphs, they are having 50 pixels of margin, right? So if you are using inherit as a value to the margin of any child element, then it will inherit the margin from the parent itself. And by default, margin property is not inherited. Now let's see about margin collapsing. Now let me create a file to explain you about margin collapsing. So you can see I have created a file over here with the name collapsed, and it is having required title, heading, paragraph, a div with 3 paragraphs inside it. So let me click back, let me refresh over here and click on collapse.html. So here's the output. Now let me provide some margin to this heading and this paragraph. So let's quickly do that. So to this heading, let me have a margin bottom as 50 pixels. And to this paragraph, the margin top as 20 pixels. Now, if I see the space between this heading and this paragraph, the margin between this heading and this paragraph doesn't change even when I added this paragraph. Let me show you again. Let me remove this part, save it, and you can see the space, the margin between this heading and the paragraph. So let me hover over the heading. The margin is 50 pixels and it is actually touching the paragraph next to it. Now if I add that paragraph over here, add the margin in that paragraph and see the margin over here, it's still 50 pixels and there is no margin before this. It is showing margin top as 20 pixels, but that margin is actually overlapping the previous one. Okay. Now this is known as margin collapsing, and whenever such thing happens, it actually doesn't provide us the required margin, or it actually doesn't provide us the margin that we are looking for. Whenever adjacent elements is having adjacent margins, it actually collapses them and puts the maximum amount of margin that is given over there. Now to solve this situation, there is a workaround over here. Now to show you that workaround, I have to remove this div and the rest of the thing which is not required right now. I don't want to create extra confusion right over here. Now there is a property which is known as float property. So the solution to overcome here is the bottommost element, or the element which is coming after, or the element which is coming later on, just add a float property over there and make it left and save it. As soon as you will do that, you will see that the collapsed margin has been removed and now both of them is having separate margins. This is one of the ways you can overcome in the collapsed margin situation. Definitely I will share rest of the ways as well. but not in this video. Now a tip I want to give to you over here is be mindful while using with inherited and collapsed margin to avoid unexpected spaces. Have you ever faced issues with inherited or collapsed margin? Share your experiences in the comment. Now that marks the end of this video. Don't forget to like or even unlike the video according to your choice. Share your thoughts in the comments and share this video with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe the channel if you haven't yet and click on the bell icon to get the notification. See you in the next video. Till then, thank you and take care.